there, Andy?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, thank you so much. So maybe if you could move us on one. So welcome all, and this is I think the 8th now in our series of 13 Friday autumn webinars on sales and marketing effectiveness, and focus today is leadership. I know most of you, but for the couple of you that I don't, my name's Andy, and I founded Better Faster Growth a few years ago, having focused pretty exclusively on sales and marketing effectiveness. And we support private equity, their portfolio companies, and other organizations in accelerating growth. Wayne, do you want to say hello?
Thanks, Andy. Nice to see familiar faces, and also welcome to those who've not met before. Wayne Tessier. I joined BFG just over 2 years ago, and prior to that, my career was in sales and marketing leadership, starting with Mars in the wonderful world of pet food, and then moving through into private equity-backed businesses. First of all, Breaks, and then Selector, working in food service and working in coffee, and the wonderful world of vending. And vending was where I met Andy, and the rest is history, as they say. Nice to see you all.
And my name is Marek Izmailovich, for those of you who don't know me, so hello everyone. My background is a mix of consulting, sort of commercial effectiveness, SFE type work at Carney, ZS Associates. And I've been in on the ground in a couple of tech startups as well that got VC and PE funding.
Great. Thanks so much. Ali's just joined us. Can you move us on, Wayne? So, as I said a moment ago, this is one of 13 in a series this autumn. And today we're focusing on leadership. Next Friday at 1 o'clock, measuring and managing performance. So do join that session, and all the remainder up to December the 13th. We look at sales and marketing effectiveness very holistically through 12 different dimensions. And though we're focusing today on leadership, obviously leadership can't be looked at in isolation. You have to have the right building blocks in place in order to be able to lead effectively. And so all of these dimensions are very interrelated, and none of them are going to enable you to be highly successful, but all together will do so, will enable you to accelerate growth. And each of these dimensions on their own can make a difference. Leadership, along with culture and perhaps incentives as well, we would say is more of an enabler. So it's critical to have great leadership, but in and of itself, it won't move the dial in the way that addressing pricing will. That being said, that if you can make a difference in leadership, that will translate to your bottom line, albeit not necessarily immediately. Over to you, Wayne.
Andy, thank you. So today we focus on the very, very broad topic of leadership. A real favourite of mine, I have to say, and but a really complex one, and I think a bit of an art. So what we've done today is break it down into 3 areas, and there are numerous different ways that we could cut this to talk about today, and would love to make this interactive, and as interactive as possible, by the way. So getting your thoughts, getting your ideas as we go through, but we'll also share our perspectives, and we'll share our experiences and where we can help and have helped around leadership support as well. And I think this will span beyond sales and marketing today, but we're going to bring some of it specifically into sales and marketing as well. So The breakout we're going to use is leading self. Also, secondly, leading the team. And then thirdly, leading the broader environment. So beyond ourselves, beyond the team, what impact can we have on either the overall sales and marketing function, or even beyond the overall business? And so when we think about it, we think about different aspects that come into leading self. You know, it's around resilience, which we'll touch on in a moment. Think about communication, think about empathy, some of those very personal but very, very important skills around leadership. And then when we think about team, strategic perspective, but very much important around being able to motivate others, something that we'll centre on today, and Marek will talk to us about, and developing others, developing the leaders of tomorrow, so that we are, in a nice way, I suppose, deposed, that we are, you know, we have our succession plans in place, and we can actually empower that team to succeed as well. They're not reliant on us or us alone. And finally, when we look at leading environment, things like vision and direction, things like relationship building outside of our organization, and how we can, if you like, broaden the reach of our environment and our organization as well. So those are the sort of topics we're going to be focusing on today, again through those three areas. So a nice little, it's nice when we think about leadership to bring it to bear in terms of, you know, real live personalities out there. So in the chat, just to get us thinking straight away, just drop in the chat which one of these three is your favorite leader, and it'd be good to get your thoughts on why. So we have Steve Jobs there, we have Nelson Mandela, and we have Elon Musk. So it'd be good, just drop in the chat, and Andy or Marek, if you can get some names out to us, that would be great, and it'd be good to understand why. And there is no right or wrong answer with this, by the way. It's very personal, which in itself is part of the message. So
Okay, we've got them coming in now. We've got Ryan said Nelson Mandela because he's selfless.
Okay. Yeah.
Bruce favors Elon Musk, or at least his persona. Oh, well, coming thick and fast. We've got another Nelson Mandela from Andy. Nelson, leading people. Katrina. Yep, Nelson, resilience, inspirational, visionary, persistence, no fancy business card. Okay, now we've got another one. Mike is going for Steve Jobs, visionary. And then we've got another Elon Musk. So, okay, we've got a spread. At least one person's gone for someone. And we've got another Nelson Mandela. I don't view him as a leader, even though he was known as one, a selfless individual promoted working alongside colleagues side by side. So yeah, I think very different leadership styles are being highlighted here and respected.
Yeah, interesting, really interesting, fascinating. I didn't actually have an idea of who would come out as the most popular. It seems like, am I right, Marek? It would be Nelson by number on that one, yeah?
I would say it's a normal distribution with Nelson in the middle, yes.
Okay, good stuff. And Elon Musk, I like the comment, like the persona, and maybe that's where it stops. But it's really interesting. So for all of us as individuals, these will show up in different ways dependent on our values. And our perception of what we want in a leader, as much as they may have some very consistent traits that all of us would say, but certain of those traits will sort of bubble through the surface to a greater extent for some of us and less for others. So it really is that sort of chemistry a lot of the time between a leader and, if you like, their followers, and no bad thing to be a follower. So that's one way we can look at it, just in terms of persona. We can think about the values, we can think about what they stand for, and it's amazing to hear. Just throw out a few of those adjectives again, Marek, that came through on the.
We've got resilience, we've got relationship builder, visionary, inspiring, persistence. Okay. What else have we got here? Selfless.
Yeah.
Yes, working, yes, side by side.
Yeah, fantastic. In fact, I was watching Colin Powell, a speech from him earlier on today, and he was talking about selflessness with his particularly in his military background. So that's one way we can look at it, and another interesting way is to think about, is leadership situational? In other words, is there a more appropriate, not appropriate, but I guess a more or less appropriate leader for a given situation, a given circumstance, a given moment in time? It'd be interesting to get your thoughts there across everyone. Who's your favourite leader there? But we're more focusing here on the situation as well. But again, just drop it in the chat out of interest. Who do you think is best suited to, maybe ask it this way, who is best situated to their situation from those three? Gandhi, our friend Donald, and Winston.
Okay, well, we've got a Churchill supporter already. Churchill,
Yeah.
Churchill. Well suited taking a nation through a war. At the time, Churchill, but doesn't stand the test of time. We've got another one for our friend Winston. Churchill again. Okay, so this is much more skewed here to Winston Churchill.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, my wife's grandmother said exactly the same as many of you. Winston Churchill. In fact, her words were, I think he was sent. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because there was a comment there around not stood the test of time. Go on, Marek.
Yeah, sorry, just another one with last minute. We've got Gandhi had a non-violent focus strategy to succeed in a major goal.
Yeah, yeah, and achieved it in a very, very different way. No one talking about Donald. I suppose the test of time will see, won't it? But in particular, if we think about Churchill, it was a moment in time, and actually over time that the situation, circumstances clearly changed, and then it wasn't to be thereafter. But for when it was most important, one could argue that it was absolutely situational. If I pick a personal example for me, you know, I often went into a business that actually, if you like, was in not a complete rip apart and put back together turnaround, but certainly a business that needed an improvement in its results. And I think sometimes as a leader, and particularly with a sales and marketing aspect, it's often that situation of, are we there to improve? And it's almost a you know, it's running nicely. Can we optimize it? Can we make it go even faster? Is it a complete rip apart and put back together? Is it a case where it just needs momentum, and it needs you know, it's been in decline, so it might not need a rip apart, but it's absolutely, can we turn it around? Can we put the handbrake on first, and then can we actually get it going again? And equally, it can be a different situation as well. I think about some of the people on this call who are going through, you know, situations where we've got mergers. So we have other businesses coming into the business to change the shape of it, and that's a completely different skill in itself. So I suppose it's worth us thinking about, sometimes leadership is about requiring different skills at different stages. It doesn't have to be a completely different persona, but can be a different, certainly a different skill set. And one of the things that's already come up through some of this is some of the different attributes that come out. So be interesting again to get your thoughts. But whilst we finish on famous people, we have Richard Branson here, we have Oprah, and we have Walt Elijah Disney. What connects all those three people? Again, just drop it in the chat for us, if you will. What connects them? And then we'll leave it with the famous people. Promise.
We've got media and motion pictures. as one offering. Visionaries,
Yeah.
icons, came from little, so very self-driven. These are all sensible suggestions. Media
Yeah.
personas.
Yeah. All
Adventurous.
successful, self-starters. Any others, Marek?
Adventurous. I'm not sure if Oprah has tried to fly around the world in a hot air balloon.
No, maybe not.
The contract was high enough.
Yeah.
Persona equals brand. Oh, fascinating. Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Yeah. All actually entirely correct. Not what I have actually got for you, but I've got a completely flip way of looking at these three people, and it's this, that they all failed. Richard Branson has failed in numerous businesses, over the years. Virgin Cola started and is no more. There was I'm not sure who in marketing came up with this, but there was a bridal service called Virgin Brides. Oprah Winfrey, she had a very, very tough upbringing, and she actually had her first child at a very young age and brought that child up in poverty and got turned away by so many media channels, and there are so many to get turned away by in the US. And then eventually now, as we know, she owns her own. And Walt Disney's actually, the business went under, and for a considerable sum, I mean, 6 figures plus, in the 50s, before Mickey Mouse came through and succeeded. And in those days, that amount of money could have sunk many a person. So one of the things we look for in leadership, I guess, before we even think about what function somebody is in, is about this opportunity to learn from failure, and this opportunity to have a growth mindset. And actually, there's a great piece of work out for anyone who's interested in this area by an author called Carol Dweck, Dweck, an American authoress, and she has written on this topic. She's a psychology lecturer, and it's all about that ability to talk positively to oneself, but be prepared to have a go and to be prepared for setbacks. And I'm going to guess that all of us on this call at some point have experienced setbacks, have experienced that, if you like, failure, which sounds a big word, but failure can be small, large, or in between. And it's the ability to bounce back from that, but actually be prepared to take a risk, be prepared to have a go, and acknowledge that in doing so, we'll learn from it. And that's one of the skills, that's one of the things that we look for. When we're thinking about leading self, when we're thinking in this area of leading self, before thinking about leading a team, there are various different ways that we can best develop. And some of these we help with at BFG. For example, we have a leadership survey 360, so not only the chance to assess oneself, but be assessed by others and get a read and compare and contrast. So feedback is really, really key in that sense, but also coaching and advisory and the chance to actually say some stuff out loud to someone else in a non-business context sometimes as well can be really, really powerful to develop self. And of course, learning by doing, which in the classic 70-20-10 way of developing, the 70% is learning by doing. And we'd really advocate that, but always in concert with some other mechanisms like learning from others, and also learning some good theory, from training or from reading or from any other source. So really, really important that as a leader, that we are developing ourselves, we're investing in ourselves to be the kind of best version to then support our teams. And some of those areas we support with at BFG and have supported with. When we're, I suppose, in a good place, then it's possible to lead a team effectively. And thinking about this, it's about building the right team, first of all, so assembling that right team. And that can be quite a task in itself, especially depending on the nature of where we're at in that business life cycle. Like I said, it could be a turnaround, it could be an improved situation, it could be a merger where we're actually merging two teams. That's a really complex one. Good fun, I've been there, but it is complex. Secondly, motivating the team. And thirdly, then driving the performance from that team that's been assembled.
Just
So those are the sort of three areas that we can think about when we're leading the team.
Before you move on, I was when you were doing the different personas of you know, the different personalities, things like that, it sort of made me think. I was trying to think of great leaders in great companies that I've experienced, who are, I was trying to think of polar opposites, right? Because to your point earlier, I think there's situation leaders, the right person for the right time, things like that. In what, you know, there was one company that I worked with where the CEO he's basically a politician. He was such a charmer, and he was the right person for the right job at the time. He raised so much money, more money than the product really deserved at that time. But it was fantastic, right? He was exactly who you needed. And he built up a company. Without him, there'd be no company. And in another place, there was a guy he was not as polished, honestly. He really wasn't the same kind of guy. But he was an energizer bunny. He was so driven. His personality was absolutely infectious. And the thing is, he was a visionary, because at the time we were developing software which wasn't ready. The market wasn't ready for it. The data wasn't there. He was a visionary. He was thinking years ahead. And when the data and the software kicked in, the company went stratospheric, right? But he had to be resilient, because people were saying, no, 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 this is wrong. Concentrate on something else, you know, all that kind of stuff. And another guy, complete polar opposite, but again, situational. The company had grown up, but it reached a bit of a plateau. And, you know, the original leader, much more like the first two, quite inspirational. But the company reached a bit of a limit. And this guy was more of a bean counter. You know, I'll be honest with you, people didn't like him, but my God, did people respect him. And he was fantastic. And again, he was the right leader for that next stage of the company. He just operationalized the hell out of it, right? And he got the best out of the people in lots and lots of different ways. None of them were through charm, I'll tell you that. But he's probably one of the most inspirational people I've met. So again, you know, there's no one size fits all. We're not advocating for one specific type of leader, you know, but there's lots of different effective types of leaders.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Marek. And it's nice to have some live examples there, and I'm sure we've all got them. I'm sure we're all thinking back to people, or even right now, who we sort of relate to in that. One of the things that's then key, if we're thinking about leading the team, is building the right team, first of all. So, and something that we often are involved around, and it is more complex. It's great looking at an organogram, and in that we might be thinking about what's the cost of it. You know, what kind of channels do we need to think about, which relates to previous dimensions that we've looked at through these webinars. We might look at layers again, you know, which in itself has cost implications around managerial. It has implications around what's the span of control, what's a manageable team size, etc., dependent on the job role. Again, you know, this can be looked at through an organogram and an organization. But then there are things which really come in where I think it's a real skill to be able to then think about, okay, what's the culture I'm trying to build? But interestingly, you know, almost from what I've got already in the team, if I'm not building it from scratch, that is, you know, if I'm blending in, what do I need in terms of personality type here? Do I need someone who's going to, you know, be more energized and, you know, is going to rip it up and come in the team and almost nitro charge everyone? Or do I need somebody who's going to be more collaborative and, you know, and more watching and questioning, almost getting consensus? And I guess there's no right answer in that. It's completely dependent on the situation again, but also the team that we've got in place. Equally, there's a personality aspect to that team. There's also skill, a question around what skills are required at that time. Do I have a gap? And rather than almost like, continue to recruit for the existing skills I've got and amplify them, what's the gap I've got, and can I close that gap through actually who I hire or who I bring in from another part of the business. And then there's that experience bit as well. Again, that could be a gap. It could be I've not got the industry knowledge I need here, or if we're innovating, what do I need to bring in there? Maybe it's a completely different skill set or knowledge area to that which I've got today. And they may feel like an alien when they land in this organization, but that's because we're preparing for the future. A bit like Marek's example just there, it's software that the market doesn't yet know it needs. So we need to almost recruit for something that doesn't exist today. So really, really interesting aspect this, and one I know from personal experience, it's only you sometimes as the leader are able to really have that almost helicopter view of the team you're assembling, and it may not be obvious to the team they're in until it's actually all together in a room or in a building. We've then got to think about leading the team. Over to you, Marek, to talk through this.
Yeah, this is not invented by BFG, so I'm sure you've all seen it. We've got plenty of our own frameworks that reflect this as well. But we just thought this is something I guess you'll be familiar with. You'll have seen about adaptive leadership, supportive behaviors, directive behaviors, and there's always a time and a place for each. Before I go into this, I just wanted to pull up a quote from Nick Saban, American football coach. He said, "Average players want to be left alone. Good players want to be coached. And great players want to be told the truth," right? And I guess what that sort of makes me think of is there's an element here of will and skill, right? There's developing people's skills, and there's people's receptivity to improving themselves, developing in whatever way. It could be technical skills, it could be softer skills, whatever it happens to be. And I guess some leaders, if they're not particularly good, I'm going to be perfectly honest, can only operate in one way, whether they're very directive or they're very delegating, or whether they're coaching, whatever it happens to be. And I think a sign of a good leader is to be able to adapt. There is a time and a place for telling people what to do, and it could be because that person either doesn't have the skills or the will, or it could be just that the situation is very new. And it's very time sensitive. You need to just get stuff done, and you go and do it. But if I think back to a situation where I presented something once, and the person who saw me presenting it could see I was a little bit embarrassed, a little bit reluctant, and they knew me very well, and they said, "Someone told you to do this like this, didn't they?" And I was like, "So because I know you wouldn't have done it that way." Right? Someone has told you. And the thing is, what I presented wasn't wrong. It wasn't right. I was told to do it in a very, very specific way. It wasn't wrong. But the leader had only done it in one particular way. They had no ability to think beyond that. And they just went, no, you have to do it in this way. And, maybe they could have just been a little bit more delegating in that situation, maybe a bit of a support, direction, rather than just saying, do it in one way. On the other hand, if you're purely all about, supporting and delegating, maybe sometimes some people don't feel that healthy pressure that maybe they should, and people can take the mick a little bit. So, there's the right time, and it's about understanding the people and teams you're working with and their personalities and quite frankly, the situations they're in, and just adapting appropriately.
And I would just add to that if you think about the sales and marketing environment, your respective businesses will go through inflection points, hopefully generally growth related inflection points, but sometimes there'll be an unanticipated shock, whether that's COVID, whether that's a new competitor, a new regulation. And there are just times when it's not kind of business as usual, and you do have to be more directive than you otherwise would be to reset the direction. So I guess
Situation dependent, Andy.
It's all
Absolutely.
situation dependent is what I wanted to say. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Marek. Thanks, Andy. Over to you, Andy, to talk about when we've got that team in place, then how do we drive performance?
Yeah, I mean, one of the key roles of a leader is to drive and manage performance. And again, with the sales and marketing leadership lens on, what we advocate is having a relatively small set of metrics. It doesn't need to be the ones that you're looking at right now, but a similar set, and ensuring that you're not just looking at your outputs, your results, because everyone does that reasonably well. What a lot of leaders that we come across don't do so well is look at the inputs. And you don't need to look at the inputs if the outcomes are all great. But it's when the outcomes fall short that, having not looked at inputs, it's suddenly too late to do anything about it. Because if the revenue falls short, you should have done something about the inputs 3 or 6 months previously. So we always advocate a balance, and we're going to go into much more detail on this next week on Friday's webinar next week. So I won't dwell on this now, but we advocate a balance between the leading and lagging indicators and looking across both your existing business, how can I retain and grow and win back my lost customers, as well as your new business, how can I ensure that I'm growing the business through constant replenishment with new customers.
Right. Thanks, Andy. And now looking at that third element of leading the environment. So if we're developing ourselves, we're focusing appropriately on that to make sure that we're set up for success with others. When we've focused on leading the team, how do we get that broader reach? What's the role we can play in it, if you like, that broader environment in the business, be it in our function or even wider than that? Let's have a look at that. And Andy, back to you talking around culture.
Yeah, and it all starts with why. And for those of you who were able to join us last week, that was our focus. If you weren't able to join us last week, then the webinar recording is on YouTube. But a crucial role of any leader is the why are we in business, the purpose. What's our cause? And often when we ask leaders, what's, why are you on business? Why are you in business? We get a very disappointing answer. I'm in business to make money. I'm in business to grow by 10%. And that may all be true, but that's not going to get your respective teams to wake up in the morning early every single morning and fight tooth and nail to grow the business. It's just not going to happen that way. If you've got an exciting purpose that everyone can relate to, that resonates across the business, then the hard yards are done. Culture-wise, culture is for us, it's collective behaviors, and it starts with the why. Why are we in business? We advocate against that why, defining a set of values. What we often see is values on posters and mugs, and leaders expecting that by osmosis people will live those values. That doesn't happen. What we suggest is defining behaviors at a granular level that you expect to see, you expect to be lived day in, day out, and then recruiting, performance managing against those behaviors. And that's a really critical aspect of leadership that often gets overlooked.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, and helps, I suppose, translate an area that is very complex and break it down into something that's manageable and can be measured, which is a real trick. And when we think about leading the environment as well, it's also around sometimes, you know, needing to define, redefine, or even build from scratch the strategy. And we shared a few weeks ago, or in fact, a client of ours came on and shared a piece of work that had been done around working out where to play. And so often what we advise is to think about strategy, because the word strategy in itself sometimes can sort of be off-putting for some people, and in reality it's a plan. But at BFG we think about it like this. We think about it as, you know, let's first of all make sense, and something that we often do. It's a very much often an analytical process. So actually making sense, you know, amassing everything that's in front of us and getting it in front of us is the first stage. And then when we do that, and this chart on the right indicates that kind of thing, it's about making choices. And those choices won't be right, they won't be wrong, but they're the most appropriate at that moment in time for what we know. And we have to kind of go with it. And, you know, don't let perfection be the enemy of good. So make some choices, and then it's about whoops, just come off. No, I'm on the same screen. It's then about making it happen. So we've got to get into execution. That's about not just trying to get to complete perfection. And then it's about making revisions as we get feedback, as we work out what's working and what's not. And this exercise on the right there, the market prioritization, is a great example of the kind of stuff that we've done and can be done just in one simple area of working out where to play, if you like. And then it can then go into a broader strategy document. And I know some of the people on the call, for example, have seen examples of this kind of template: objective, goals, strategies, and then measures. And it's a great way to actually get it onto one page. I've got one particular example in mind, which I won't say publicly, but I've seen a great example of this from someone on the call. And it's something that we also help with. So that's also one of the roles within leadership. So a few of our favourite reads, as we always share on these, some of our inspiration, particularly with the management and development of oneself. Stephen Covey, a fantastic read. If anyone's not ever got to it, please do. Would highly recommend it. Superb piece of work, and lots of other supporting work around it. Carol Dweck is the piece that I referenced there on growth mindset, and the piece that Marek eloquently talked us through, the piece around situational leadership, comes from Blanchard, the 1 Minute Manager, and a great piece of work that holds up time and time again. So I guess just to come off our sort of view of life at the moment, be good to get your narrative on which of these is the biggest leadership challenge you've typically faced, or you face right now and you see as a leadership challenge. Is it building the best team? Is it driving performance, or is it developing the next leader for your organization? What's your feedback, folks?
Can I suggest that while people are giving that some consideration, could I put you on the spot, Mike? Mike Hicks is known to some of you, and Mike Hicks has specialized all his career in leadership and organization management. And so you have probably the best view of anyone in this room of what good leadership looks like, and what challenges leaders face. Do you want to just share a couple of reflections? I know I've put you on the spot.
I mean, happy to, shoot from the hip, as it were, Andy. I mean, I guess there's the problem with a topic is like leadership, and I think, remember at some point saying some statistic that there are, I don't know, like 1 million books on leadership or something, is one could talk in all sorts of directions quite for a long, long time about the topic. I guess when it comes to the world that you, Andy, and Wayne American and ourselves work in, kind of mid-market growth companies, I would just say a couple of things. When we ask management teams, I mean, when we've asked hundreds of management teams, what are the main things that they see as stretching? You know, the commercial side of driving top line features very heavily amongst the 31 things that we asked them about. So that means that sales leadership is really important, because leadership is a complex job. It's balancing, it's making judgments, trade-offs, and so on. When I look at Catalysis reports, and we're not, like you, focused just, you know, primarily on the commercial side of things, but across the piece, the two big areas which come from a functional perspective, which keep appearing again and again in private equity deals, is finance, because investors like finance to be in a shape where they can ask lots of questions, and again the commercial side. That's the bit that we make most recommendations about, and the investors ask us most about. Again, with us being a little bit further away from the front line of that than you guys are, I would offer just a really, really simple way of thinking about this. I think any leader, and that's true for chief executives, but I think it's still very much true for you know, whether it's a chief commercial officer, sales director, or whatever the kind of most senior seat commercial role is. At the end of the day, there are two big jobs. The first is to set clarity of direction and priority. You know, and I know that picks up some of the topics you're covering in other sessions around, you know, just how do you set a proper commercial strategy? The biggest problem that most mid-market teams that we talk with have is that their energies are dispersed in too many directions, and therefore they don't have bandwidth. And so, you know, for the commercial leader to be providing that level of focus for their sales managers and, you know, salespeople, you know, is massively important. And, you know, you've already said it elsewhere, but I'm going to repeat it here. And the second thing is, have you actually worked out whether you have the team and organization to deliver whatever ambitious targets is that you have got? And our experience is across the piece is that most organizations tend to think about those issues when it hits them in the face, rather than necessarily in advance and thinking about their scalability, you know, in good time. So I've waffled on. If that's helpful to you, Andy.
Yeah, no, it's very helpful. Thank you, Mike. Thank you.
Any other things coming through for people on these three areas as challenges, or even outside of these three?
So on these three things, I would almost view them as hierarchical rather than optional. But I know not in all cases, because it is situation dependent, and I don't know who else has got a military background, but there's been a couple of references, so I'll go for it. There's a term in the military called lines of development, or defense lines of development, and the idea is that if you teach somebody to shoot, but they don't have the means to get, maintain, repair a weapon or transport ammunition, then there was no point in teaching them to shoot. So, you know, if you want to drive performance, but the team is not right, or is under resourced, or there's X other, you know, frictions and fractions going on, then you're probably not going to get that. And then if you're not getting performance, driving performance, then it's sometimes difficult to motivate people to want to be those next leaders, or step into that position, or put their head above the parapet, to use yet another military analogy. So I know it's not a hard and fast rule, but I would almost say they're kind of almost like a hierarchy of needs rather than a strand. Yeah. No, great perspective on it, Bruce. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm with Bruce on that. Also ex-military, so I get that.
As you can tell by my
Yeah. You've been a lot more recent than I was. The thing for me is probably B at the moment, driving performance. And it's not that I've not got a willing team that work very hard. I could recruit more. It's getting the rest of the business. I get about 55% of my time is sales time. So I'm losing 45% of available sales time a week on stuff. And currently working really hard to pull the rest of the business to become more of a understand the sales-led culture, if you like, that every time they say, oh, sales will do it, or that's the account manager's job, or throw that at the account manager, we just lose revenue. And it could be through churn, not contacting customers or new business, and it drives me insane. So that's all about the environment, I guess, more than anything else. But that's currently number one for me.
Great, thank you for that. Thanks, Graham. Thanks for sharing that. And nice that we've got some shared backgrounds here. And I think the military perspective is a great one. I think it's probably the most stark use of leadership in a very, very good way. I think it's incredibly motivational as a sort of an environment to hear about. So very relevant. And they are interrelated, as Mike, you alluded to. It's complex. Any other thoughts before we close up the session with a few more thoughts?
Yeah, can I add a couple of perspectives just really quickly?
Please, Jeremy. Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, I sort of feel that all of these three are the challenges that I currently face. So I've joined a fairly new business. It's PE backed. So building the best team for me would always be the most important feature of any leader. You can't spend an inordinate amount of time doing this because often you don't have that, certainly not in the PE world, but best people, different kind of people, diverse backgrounds, different capabilities and knowledge, I think is what you really do need to have a really great team that performs really well. Without that great team, I don't think you can drive your performance. So for me, that is the number one. But I do feel in this new role that certainly PE is first time I worked in private equity. Developing the next leaders internally doesn't seem to be a priority. There are short-term demands for increases in EBITDA positions and revenue growth positions. And I think that for me, again, it's a challenge for me because in all my roles previously, I've been always about helping people to aspire to grow, to develop, and to succeed in their own respective careers. Because I think that is a really valuable trait of any leader, to enable people to be the best versions of themselves they possibly can be. So that's just my very quick observations.
Great. Thanks, Jeremy. Thank you.
There's always a tension, isn't there, especially with private equity-backed businesses, of delivering or exceeding targets this month versus building for the future. Now, and I know we know for a fact that private equity puts a lot of pressure on the monthly and the quarterly. Having said that, at the end of the day, they want the best possible price at the end of their 4-year holding period, and they're not going to get that unless the building blocks for sustained growth are in place.
Yeah, it's a balancing act, isn't it?
I think that's a challenge for any leader, particularly someone like me who's new into this kind of environment, to get your head around, really, that balancing act between maximizing the valuation at exit versus the clear requirements to build for a sustainable future, to use your words, and to help and attract a new generation of leadership into an organization to continue that growth path. And it is a balance, and it's a difficult one for me at the moment.
Yeah.
Great, thank you, Jeremy. So just by way of wrapping up, before we get your closing takeouts, which we'd love to do, just to have a think about a 1 or 2 word key takeout for you from today would be great. But while you think about that, just to remind you, we have the BFG grade survey, a self analysis that's possible through only a bunch of questions and circa 20 minutes. It's online, and very happy to then share the output from that with you. And often it's not just about one person completing it. Often if several people complete it, it's good to start a debate around what those different perspectives are unveiling and why there are different perspectives as well. So consider that angle of it as much as completing it for yourself. So that offer is there for anyone who wants to follow up with us. Also a reminder about next week, as Andy alluded to, next week's webinar is Managing Sales and Marketing Performance. We use this as a placeholder to articulate what that's all about, but it's clearly broader than that. But look forward to seeing as many of you and any of your network next week to discuss that. And a reminder as well to put Friday through to December 13th in your diary for this as a repeat. And as we say, they are available online as well. So a massive thank you today for both your attendance, your contribution as well. It's been great to get some debate and get some thoughts as we go through. But before we do that, it would just be great to get your final takeouts. Either speak them out or drop them in the chat, whichever. 1 or 2 words or whatever springs to mind.
I just wanted to say, as it's the first session, I found it really insightful. Thank you. I guess I'm a little bit newer to both the private equity world and what I would consider to be grown-up leadership responsibilities, having managed sort of like, mid-management and SDRs before. This is, it's just been super useful. And actually hearing that other folks are perhaps going through the same challenges that I'm currently going through, that's quite reassuring as well. Thank you. Yeah.
Great, James. Thank you.
I think from my perspective, I mean, Marek's quote, the football analogy, in terms of average, good, and exceptional. I sort of like now keep looking at faces in my head of my people, and just thinking that those that like to be left alone, that want to be self-sufficient, actually, they're probably average players. And thinking about the team, and obviously thinking about the scalability and the challenges that we face under PE over the next sort of like 18 months, 2 years. And getting the business from where it was to where it needs to be, and that uptick and that up, and the team, the strength of the team, and the scalability, the challenges that all of that brings. So there's lots of things here that resonate that you can reflect back into your daily life, and thinking about the leadership challenges. And I think one of the challenges that we have, certainly I have, is ensuring that the team that sit alongside me and below me are able to actually take on responsibilities going forward, and I'm not sure in all areas we've got those people either. So there's lots of work to do.
Great. Thanks,
and Bruce in the chat has said take out improve and humble self to improve surroundings, environment and people. Is that the right interpretation, Bruce? You're on mute. You're not on mute.
Yes, I would say just to try to put into as few words as possible. I think it can be quite easy. I've come into a couple of different situations for kind of short turnaround improvements, and then came into where I am now. I think it can be easy to either think you've got it, or think that that square peg will definitely fit this round hole. Where actually you mentioned earlier, you need to be on that sort of scope for improvement, and realizing that you might not have all the answers, but you might have parts of it. I think my only closing remark would be, we often talk about good leaders, good examples. I've learned arguably more from bad than I have from good. Those that I want to emulate and those pitfalls that I want to avoid. It can teach you just as much about what to do next, or what not to do.
That's great. No, thank you. And Graham says, keep leading on all fronts. Jeremy says, balance now with tomorrow. And Ali says, great framework for further assimilation and reflection. Ali, were you referring to the self-team environment framework, the general framework, or?
Yeah, just the self-team environment.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Thanks, Ali.
And Simon says, shares problems, so not alone, specifically in the private equity environment.
Yeah, I was quite quick to start there. Shared problems across.
Shared problems.
Okay. Yeah, my fault. The people who have talked, particularly the ones who are in the PE-backed environment. This is our second round, as you know, and it's stepped up significantly from our first venture into PE, which was between 21 and 2024. Then our new venture in 24 this year. March this year, March 24. It's a completely different ballgame in terms of that real short-termism, in terms of making sure we're hitting numbers month on month, and exceed them, to what we're trying to, put the seeds in the ground for, future growth, value creation. That's very important to them. How, what's the value creation plan? But at the same time, you've got to hit your numbers relentlessly every month, and that balance between the two is an interesting balancing act to try and take on and keep backers happy.
Absolutely. Good. Well, thank you all so much for joining us, and look forward to seeing many, if not all of you, again next Friday when we talk about performance management, and wish you a great afternoon and a brilliant weekend.